So what we're going to do now is determine the solutions to these quadratic equations. So we need to solve x squared plus 7x plus 10 equals 0. So what I'm going to do first is see if I can factor this equation. So I'm looking for factors of 10 that sum to make 7. So if I think about some factors, we could do 1 and 10, but that sums together to make 11, so that's not it. And then I can also multiply to make 10 by using 5 and 2, and 5 plus 2 is 7. So in factoring that, I know that my first number is going to be x and x, and then I can put the plus 5 and the plus 2 and set that equal to 0. So here we have x plus 5 equals 0 and x plus 2 equals 0. So then what you do is subtract 5 from both sides, and you would get x equals negative 5. And then here, subtract 2 from both sides and get x equals negative 2. Now, if I'm looking at how to solve this equation, what I would do is pull out the greatest common factor between 8x squared and 16x. So I look in there, and number-wise, I can take an 8 out, and with a variable, I can pull an x out. So if I take 8x squared and divide that by 8x, all that would be left is x, because 8x times x is 8x squared. Similarly, if I take 8x out of 16x, all that would be left would be 2. And now I'm going to use the zero product property and set both factors equal to 0. So we have 8x equals 0 and x plus 2 equals 0. So then from there, you would divide both sides by 8 on this equation, and we would get x equals 0. And then here, you can subtract 2 from both sides and get x equals negative 2. And then here, we have 1/5 x squared equals 0.8. Now, one thing that I want you to notice is if there is no x term, you can solve this taking a square root. So what I'm going to do is multiply both sides by 5. So I'm going to put 5 times 1/5 and 0.8. I'm going to use parentheses here and then put times 5. Then here, 5 times 1/5, well, that makes 1. So we have x squared equals, and then 0.8 times 5 is equal to 4. Now, if I have x squared equals 4, you would just solve that by taking the square root of both sides. So x would equal, remember when we take the square root, you're going to have a plus or minus, and the square root of 4 is 2. If you're unsure of that on a calculator, you can do that here with second x squared and 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. So remember, this is plus or minus 2 because 2 times 2 is 4, and negative 2 times negative 2 is also 4. Now, to solve this equation, we need to move all the variables on one side and have 0 on the other. So what I'm going to do is subtract 2x squared from both sides. And here, 3x squared minus 2x squared is going to make x squared. That's going to cancel out. Next, I'm going to add 4x to both sides. And 2x plus 4x would be plus 6x. And now I would add 3, and there's nothing here to add 3, so this would just become plus 3. Over here, this would equal 0. Now, in looking at this equation, this cannot be solved by factoring, so I would move to the quadratic formula. So in order to do that, what you would do is do x equals negative b, so negative 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 6 squared, minus 4 times a, well, a is 1 because it's 1x squared, times c, so times 3, all over 2 times 1. So I'm just going to write 2. Now what I'm going to do is do this discriminant all at once. I'm going to take the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 3. So on this calculator, I'm going to go the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 3. And you get 4.89. So this is going to be an approximate answer, not an exact answer. So negative 6 plus or minus 4 point, and then instead of 89, that would round to 90, divided by 2. So now I'm going to have to break this up. I'm going to go negative 6 plus 4.90 divided by 2, and negative 6 minus 4.90 divided by 2. So in this calculator, you can use a fraction feature and go alpha x, then negative 6 plus 4.90, arrow down to the denominator and hit 2. And then we would get here x equals negative 0.55. And then down here, for my other one, I can go negative 6 minus 4.90, and then divided by 2. And you would get x equals negative 5.45. So here, when we're solving this system of equations here, one thing that you can do is solve this graphically. So you can put this into Desmos.com. So if you don't have a calculator, you can go to Desmos.com and then graph y equals negative x plus 5, and also y equals 2x squared minus 2x minus 5. And I'm going to show you how to do that on this graphing calculator. So you press y equals, and then I'm going to put in negative x plus 5. Then down here, 2x squared minus 2x minus 5. Then I'm going to graph that. And if you notice, I'm not seeing the whole window. So I'm going to press zoom 6. And you notice we have 2 intersection points. So here I'm going to calculate the intersection point. Now when it says the first curve, I need to go to the left of the intersection point. And then on the second curve, you go to the right of the intersection point. And then your guess, you can just hit enter again. And one intersection point is negative 2 for x and 7 for y. And then you can go over here and find this intersection point. So second, calculate. Go to where it says intersect. And again, you need to be to the left of the curve. Then over here to the right. And it's 2.5 and 2.5. So those are our intersection points there. So for this equation here, I would use the quadratic formula again. So x equals negative b. So remember, negative b is going to be positive 16 because this would be negative of negative 16, which turns positive, plus or minus the square root of b squared. So negative 16 squared, putting parentheses there, minus 4 times a, so times 5, and then times c, which is 3, all over 2 times 5. So I'm going to put parentheses. Then what you would do here is go second square root. So let's get out of there. Second square root, and then of, and go negative 16, and then squared, minus 4 times 5 times 3. And that gives us 14. So this is negative 16 plus or minus 14 over 2 times 5 is 10. So then we're going to have two answers, and we just break it up. So we have negative 16 plus 14 over 10, and negative 16 minus 14 over 10. And here, negative 16 plus 14 is negative 2 over 10. And you can leave that as a fraction. You could reduce that to negative 1/5. And some people might like the decimals, so negative 1 divided by 5 gives us negative 0.2. Then here, negative 16 minus 14 is negative 30 over 10, which is negative 3. So here we have two answers. X equals negative 0.2, and x also equals negative 3. Now for this equation here, I notice there's not an x term, so I can solve this directly with square roots. So what I'm going to do is move the numbers to one side and get x squared by itself. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides and get 2x squared equals 32. Then divide both sides by 2, and x squared is equal to 32 divided by 2 is 16. And then to get rid of x squared, you would take the square root of both sides, and x is equal to, I know the square root of 16 is 4. Remember, when we do that, we go plus or minus, and then our 4. So we would have two answers, x equals 4, and also x equals negative 4. And I'm going to box those in so that they stand out.